When I was a kid, I had a dream. This is not like a Dr. King speech, don't worry. But I did. I had a dream. And my dream was like most kids who play any sport when you're a kid, you dream of being a professional at said sport. You play tennis when you're a kid, you probably dream of growing up and playing on the, I don't even know what it's called, but professional tennis, right? Like you play baseball, you want to play in the major leagues. You play football, you want to play in the NFL. Well, I played basketball when I was a kid. So I had an NBA dream from the time I could remember. I started playing basketball like in leagues and kind of competitively in third grade, and I loved it. I was a kid that always had a ball with me. I was always dribbling somewhere. I was dribbling in the house getting yelled at. I was dribbling in my grandparents' house. The only thing is I didn't realize that their house really wasn't a house. It was actually a double-wide trailer they had made to look like a house. And so you dribble in it, and it's like hollow, and it's like, what's wrong with y'all floor, Grandma? But I dribble in their house. I dribble everywhere I could because I loved basketball. I'm talking about I did not miss an opportunity to hoop. Like, it didn't matter what I was wearing. I was wearing a suit, time to hoop. Like it didn't matter. Before school, after school. In fact, as I got a little older, me and several of my friends we would wear anywhere we would go. We would wear basketball shorts under our school pants, under our jeans, under our whatever, because you never know when it's time to hoop. I loved it. I love basketball so much. Played in school, played in middle school, played in high school. And I get to 10th grade, and I'm playing on our high school team. And I'll never forget the day my coach pulled me to the side. He pulled me to the side. He said, Michael, he said, can I talk to you after practice? I said, yes, sir. And I mean, I was playing. I was like, I wasn't just like a dude who was kind of like on a team. And it was like, he's going to get to like play for 30 seconds when he's a senior. Like I was starting in 10th grade and all this kind of stuff. It was good. But the only problem was I wasn't really growing much taller, but I was a big boy. And my coach pulled me to the side, and he looked just me dead up in the eye, and he said, Michael, he's like, you got some talent. I said, thank you, coach. He said, there's a problem, though. He said, you too big to keep playing as we go forward. Like, I'm gonna need you to lose some weight. I'm gonna need you to get thinner, so that way as we're pushing the pace, it's how you always like the last one getting back. Like, I'm gonna need you, like, your talent's great. Like, I love the fact that you pass, you shoot, you're a good defender. I love that. But I'm gonna need you to get in better shape. Otherwise, like, I don't really know what the future is gonna look like for you basketball-wise, because you're gonna have talent, but I'm gonna need you to get in shape. And on that day, I sort of made a decision. My coach left me with. And I decided that on that day, my hoop dream died. I like to eat way more than I like basketball. That's what I decided on that day. Like I had been playing golf a little bit, and I was like, in golf, I be seeing these people play golf. They be heavier than a mug. Like, maybe this is my lane. And so on that day, my NBA dream, you could say it failed on that day. I remember the event with my coach, but in actuality, what caused the failure, if you will, was not my talent and was not an event at that point. It was the fact that I decided to quit. And here's what I need you to get today, and I'd love for you to take the notes out of your worship guide and follow along as we're going today, because we think of failure as an event, but failure is always a decision. When most of us think of businesses that fail, when we think of relationships that fail, when we think of faith journeys that get rocky and seem to fail in some way, when we think of dreams that we have that fail, we often like to turn our attention to some event and think, oh, it was that event. It was that moment. It was that day. It was what they said. It was the economy. It was the fact that and we think of it as an event, but failure is always a decision. It is something that we look at and decide to do. A failing is not a failure. It's not. Just because you mess up, just because you make a mistake, just because you have some problems, just because there's some bumps along the road, does not make something or anything actually a failure. A failure is always a decision. You are not some failure because a failing happens. You simply experience failure when you decide to quit. There's a man by the name of John Maxwell that some of you will be familiar with, some of you won't. But John Maxwell was a pastor for a long time, but has spent the majority of his life and kind of got famous by speaking about and writing on the subject of leadership. And I've read a lot of books in my life, but this man has written more books than I have ever read. And in one of his books, is his book called Failing Forward, he makes this statement. He says that 90% of all people who fail are not actually defeated. They simply quit. And I think it's true. I think some of us think about moments in our lives. Some of us think about things that happen. Some of us think about dreams and aspirations and ideas, and we call that season, we call that idea a failure. And it's not a failure. We just quit. See, you're not a failure because you fail. You're a failure because you get to a point where you decide that I have quit. I will no longer do this. But the opposite of that can be true too. If you will decide that you won't quit, then you won't fail. See, if it's when you decide to quit that you do fail, then the other side of that is true too. That if you will decide that I won't quit no matter what, I won't quit no matter how hard it gets, I won't quit no matter how difficult things go, I won't quit no matter what obstacles come my way, I have decided that I will not quit. If you make that decision, then you won't fail. Now, before you think this just sounds like positive little self-talk, and it's like, did I come to a self-help speech today? Baby, let's go to the scriptures and take a look at how this is rooted in God's word. The book of Hebrews, chapter 12. I love the book of Hebrews. The book of Hebrews is this unbelievable writing that is written to Jewish people. And so you see a lot of this messiahship and the greatness of Jesus in it. You get to chapter 12, and there's this powerful, powerful statement that the writer makes, and it looks like this. It'll be on the screen for you. It says, therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us throw off everything that hinders us and the sin that so easily entangles. And let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of our faith. For the joy set before him, he endured the cross, scorning its shame, and he sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. Consider him who endured such opposition from sinners, so that you will not grow weary and lose heart. Now, these verses here in Hebrews chapter 12 immediately follow Hebrews chapter 11. I studied all week to figure that out. I'm kidding. But Hebrews chapter 11, for some of you who may know the scriptures a little bit, for those of you that don't, let me tell you why Hebrews 11 is significant. It is sort of known as a chapter that we have identified as the hall of faith, as some people will call it. People talk about the Hall of Fame in different sports because of the greatness of the participants of said sport, the coaches, the athletes in those sports. Well, this Hebrews 11 is a unique chapter in that the writer recounts the greatness of men and women who follow God by faith. But what I love about Hebrews 11 when you read it is you don't just read about all of their highlights. It's not like you watch SportsCenter and just see their da-da-da-da-da and all the greatness that was them. It actually talks about their struggle too. It actually talks about the difficulties. It actually talks about the bumps in the road that they faced. It talks about the moments when they didn't know how they was going to make it, but they made it anyway. And it walks through the stories of so many people, not just telling us that they were unbelievable, but telling us something about them, that they had enough faith not to quit. It tells us about a man named Abraham. Abraham, who's the sort of the grandfather of our faith, who was this incredible man who simply on a word from God followed him wherever he said go. And it mentions that. But it also lets us be reminded of the fact that Abraham did not have this perfect journey. See, Abraham was promised by God that he was going to be a great nation, but Abraham got old and he ain't had no kids. And his wife didn't have any kids either. And they started talking and saying, if God's going to make us into a great nation, maybe God wants us to help God. And so what if we do this? And so there were moments along their journey where they got sidetracked. And there were moments along their journey where they tried to take matters into their own hands. But yet because they didn't quit, they're recounted as these people of great faith. Abraham's grandson was a man named Jacob, and Jacob was shady from the start, but he's in this chapter. And Jacob was a deceiver. He tricked his own dad into blessing him, even though his brother was supposed to get the blessing. And Jacob spent much of his life kind of wheeling and dealing and trying to cover things up and trying to do stuff and make stuff happen. And he does all this kind of stuff, but yet he didn't quit. And because he didn't quit, we get to Hebrews chapter 11, and the writer writes back about something that happened thousands of years ago and said, God sees this man named Jacob as a man of great faith because he didn't quit. It was men like Moses are written about in there. Now, Moses was born in Egypt, and he was born in Egypt, yet he was not Egyptian. And early in Moses' life, he saw a Hebrew person like he was being beaten up and pressured and life made miserable for someone like him by an Egyptian person. And Moses got so mad that he went out and literally killed an Egyptian. And then he ran. And then 40 years later, when God's trying to call him to go use him to help bring deliverance to God's people who are in captivity in Egypt, Moses is like, God, you can't use me. And he starts making excuses and doing all this stuff, and I can't talk and I can't do this. But yet he didn't quit. And so now in reverse, we say he's a person of great faith. There's a lady mentioned in there by the name of Rahab. And what's interesting about Rahab is the thing that we know about her is what's directly connected to her name every time she's mentioned. She is Rahab the prostitute. I will not expound upon her work very much. You know? But yet when she was presented a moment to be able to serve God, she did. And now in hindsight, because she didn't quit, God used her story. You're not a failure because you fail. You're not a failure because you mess up. You're not a failure because you blow it sometimes. You're not a failure because, I made a terrible decision. You are a failure when you quit. And so that is the cloud of witnesses that the writer begins to talk about in Hebrews chapter 12. I don't want you to think that that cloud of witnesses were people who had it all together. People who made perfect decisions, people who did everything right. They did a lot right, but sometimes they did wrong, but they kept going. They messed up, but they kept going. And so it's in light of this cloud of witnesses that we have cheering us on that the writer makes these two very important statements about your race and my race. Because that's all Hebrews 11 is. It's a recounting of some people's race. Abraham and Rahab and Moses and Jacob, and it talks about Sarah, and it talks about Gideon, and it talks about all of these people of old, they call them. It talks about their race. And then the writer turns for a second and says, now I want to talk to you about your race. And here's two things I want you to remember. And he wants you to remember these today too. Would you write these down? The first thing is this, is that God marked out your race. Verse 2 tells us, run with perseverance the race that is marked out for you. The race that God has marked out for you. Most of us don't like our race. Most of us look over to the lane next to us and be like, it would be so nice to be them. It'd be so nice to have their life. It'd be so nice to have their faith. It'd be so nice to have their money. It'd be so nice to live where they live, to have their talent, to have their ability. We like their race more than we like our race. And when we do, watch me, we are despising the race that God has called us to. God marked out your race. God gave you your talents. God also allowed you to have some places that you ain't talented. He marked out your race. He set it up for you. The second thing that the writer makes note of, I think is very important for us to not pass over. He doesn't just tell us that we have a race marked out for us by God, but he also gives us the key ingredient to our race. And he lets us know that your race requires perseverance. It requires it. Verse 2, he said, and let us run with perseverance That is the requirement. He didn't say, and let us run with speed. We'd like to get through our race real quick, wouldn't we? I am done with this. Put me on a porch somewhere. Let me drink my lemonade and retire. No. He didn't say speed. He said run with perseverance. He didn't say run with grace. Some of us just want to look good as we run our race, don't we? We do it for the gram, right? Like I'm out here, and if this looks good, I love this part of my race. But the truth is that the real part of our race is stressful, and the real part of our race is difficult, and the real part of our race don't make no sense sometimes. And the real part of our race, sometimes we mess up way more than we get it right. That's why the writer says, and you run with perseverance. Just don't give up, baby. Because if you won't quit, then you won't fail. Run with perseverance. When you get tired, keep going. When it's not going like you hoped it would go, keep going. When it's difficult, keep going. When it's easy, keep going. Run with perseverance. This word perseverance in the languages that it was originally written in actually literally means this. It means cheerful endurance. Yeah, there's a grit your teeth and bear it to it. But there's also this joy about it. I get to do this. I get to go through this. I get to serve like this. I get to help like this. I get to make a difference. Do you know there's a big difference between have to and get to? There's a big difference between I have to do this, otherwise they're going to fire me. I have to do this because I guess that's what the Lord wants. And I get to do this because God put me here. And I get to do this because God gave me influence with them. And I get to do this because I got talent to do this. So I get to do this. When it comes to our race, a lot of us go through it very differently. See, a lot of people experience difficulty in different ways, don't they? I know people who they get a hangnail on their toe and just like you think the world is falling apart. They're like, oh, woe is me. My life is so, baby, you have a hangnail. Get some clippers at Walgreens. You're going to be fine. You'll be fine. But you would think by the way they talk, you would think by the way they tweet that it's just like the world is falling apart. It is not falling apart. You got one little difficulty. It's going to be okay. Just get over it. Just handle it. You're going to be fine. And it's like the smallest little bump in the road they handle with such, ugh. But then I also know people who go through incredible amounts of stress, incredible amounts of pain, and they do it with such grace. They do it with such perseverance, cheerful endurance that you never know. You never know they're struggling. You never know they're hurting. You never know that what they gave was actually like bringing their bank account very, very close to the bottom. You think they just loaded. You never know that the time that they invested was actually the only free time they've had in the last month, but they gave it willingly. You know, I've been able to see this sort of up close and personal for the last year and a half. My wife, Mindy, her mom, about 5 or 6 years ago, I guess, was diagnosed with breast cancer. And she fought it for about a year, and they were able to beat it to where there were no more traces of it in her. Went through a lot of difficulty, all the stuff that you have to do, but was doing good. And then a year and a half ago, she got a report literally out of nowhere that it had come back, and it had come back with a vengeance, as cancer often does. And for the last year and a half, she's been fighting this. This is a physical battle in her own body. And she's dealt with chemo. She's dealt with trying to go to Atlanta to get treatment, deal with treatment here, traveling back and forth, having to do all this, while at the same time for about 13 months of that, having Mindy's sister and her family be here in the States, and they live overseas. They literally live in the Philippines. They're there now. They went back like a week or two ago. And trying to give her best to them and give energy there, while when you're fighting cancer, the thing that you have in just a diminishing supply is energy. And we get to see her enough and follow her close enough to where that's endurance. That's running your race with perseverance. Because does she have her bad days? Yeah. Does she have days where it's like, I just can't leave the house. I just can't leave my bed. Yeah. But that's not what she shares all the time. How you doing, Kathy? I'm good. She may have spent 5 of the last 7 days in her bed, but I'm good. How you feeling? I'm fine. I'm doing fine. And it's not to cover up the difficulty. It's to run with perseverance her race. Be very easy to look at people who just turned 60 and be like, why ain't they got to deal with cancer? Why I got to be the one? But she doesn't. She runs with perseverance. And it's been an example to me. It's been an example to Mindy, because we've had our difficulties. We've dealt with health difficulties with our son. But being able to see what perseverance looks like, being able to see what cheerful endurance looks like, is inspiring. Because we can so easily turn our attention to other people's race, to other people's set of circumstances, to other people's lot in life, if you will, and think, it would be nice if I. But the thing is, that is not what God has called you to. What God has called you to is He marked a race for you. And He said, you need to run this race. And I ain't asking you to run it fast. And I ain't asking you to run it pretty. And I ain't asking you to run it so that way you can set record times and other people can marvel about the wonder of your race. I'm asking you to run it with perseverance. Can you cheerfully endure this race that's marked out for you? Because here's the thing about perseverance. It ain't always pretty, but it's always possible. Oh, it ain't always pretty. Perseverance don't always look good. Perseverance doesn't always be like, oh, look how great you do that. Sometimes you are doing good just to show up. Sometimes you are doing good just to open the Bible. Sometimes you are doing good just to make it another step forward. But you are persevering. It ain't always pretty, but it's always possible. But we get hung up on other people's race, because their race looks prettier than ours. Because their race looks easier than ours. Because their race looks like more fun than ours. And so then we take our perception of their reality and lay it on top of our understanding of our reality. And we start to make statements like this that cause us to quit so fast. We start to make statements like, I thought I'd be further along by now. Because we're the same age as them. We went to the same high school as them. But they already own their own house. And we still just renting apartments. Renting rooms at people's house. If you want to be honest, I just call it an apartment. I thought I'd be further along. You know, it's February. Attendance at the gym has dropped by like 90%. You know why? Because people said, I thought I'd be skinny by now. And because I ain't, I'm out. I thought I'd be financially secure by now. I've been saving a little bit, giving a little bit. And I mean, here I am. I look at these other people and they seem like they got all the money in the world. I thought I'd be financially secure by now. I guess my way isn't working. So I'm going to stop saving. I'm going to stop giving. I'm going to stop all this. We stop doing what we know is right. We stop running our race because we look at our perception of their race and lay it over our understanding of our race. And we say, I thought I'd be healed by now. I thought the hurt on the inside, the pain on the inside, I thought I'd be healed by now. And I ain't healed yet. So I guess my trusting in God for my healing ain't really going to work. So just skip it all. Because I thought I'd be. I thought I'd be strong by now. I thought I'd be healthy by now. I thought I'd be over it by now. And we say these things and we allow them to creep into our mind and then crawl into our heart. And what it does is it actually begins to break down the perseverance that we need. Why? Because our eyes are on the wrong thing. The writer in Hebrews said, run with perseverance, the race marked out for you by God. And then the next line, he says, keeping your eyes on your neighbor and their race. No, he didn't. He said, keeping your eyes on Jesus, the author and perfecter of your faith. who for the joy set before him endured the cross, scorning its shame. Why? So that you can keep going. See, if you will bring perseverance to the race marked out for you, if you'll focus on Jesus in your race, you won't quit. You won't. Because you'll realize he has done so much for me. I could take another step. He's done more for me than I could ever do for myself, so I can take another step. I want to quit, but Jesus didn't quit, so I won't quit. For the joy set before him, he endured. So I'll focus on Jesus in my race, and I'm just going to run this thing. And then if I don't quit, I won't fail. See, you will be unfailable. You'll never fail if you won't quit. If you'll keep going. If you'll just keep going. Rather than focus on them and what they got going on, you'll focus on what God has called you to. You'll focus on what God has set before you. Because it's about your race, not theirs. See, can I let you know two things? That your race may require more perseverance than theirs. Or at least that's the way you'll see it. The race marked out for you may require more perseverance than your sisters. It may require more perseverance than a person that works in the cubicle next to you. It may require more perseverance than your best friend that you've known since you was like 8. Like it may require more perseverance than theirs. In fact, the truth is that you will always think that your race requires more perseverance than theirs. The truth is, it may. But here's what is absolutely true. Your race will require different perseverance than theirs. The perseverance required of you will be different than them. The race marked out for you is different than the race marked out for them. And so you got to run your race. Somebody say my race. You got to run your race with perseverance. If you're reading through the scriptures and you ever decide to read the Old Testament, the Hebrew scriptures, it can be a bit confusing. And I understand that. Some of you started Bible reading maybe at the beginning of the year, the Bible before breakfast, like we talked about it. And maybe you have found yourself in the Old Testament because you just started at the beginning. Where else are you going to start a book at? And you're like, I'm a little confused as to what's going on. Well, hang on, baby. It gets more confusing before it gets clear. Because you start getting into the story of the nation of Israel, and you start reading 1st and 2nd Samuel and 1st and 2nd Kings and 1st and 2nd Chronicles, and you're like, I think I read this page before, but yet it's recounting from a different perspective, something that already had happened, and it gets a little confusing. And then you start reading about these prophets, and you read Ezekiel and Daniel and Isaiah and Jeremiah and Hosea and Zephaniah and Haggai and all these people, and you're like, what's going on? And when is all of this? And is this all in order? And it gets confusing. It gets confusing because the chronology is not the same. And what we can lose sight of if we don't understand the chronology is that some of these people that are writing at the same time with completely different perspectives. There's a man in the Old Testament who writes, a man by the name of Daniel. He has a self-titled work, and it's fascinating. The end of it's a little confusing because it's prophetic, but the beginning of it is where some of your favorite little Bible stories that you saw on a flannel graph when you was like 4 at a VBS in some church basement, that's where you saw them. The 3 Hebrew boys in the fiery furnace, that's in Daniel. The lion's den, that's in Daniel. And Daniel has this unbelievable life. Daniel is a devout follower of the God of Israel. But yet he's given this seat of influence with every single ruler who comes across in his adult lifetime. Even though he, as a Hebrew, is actually in exile, he ain't even in his homeland. It's not like he's getting getting influence with some people that are of the same bloodline and all this stuff. No, the people he has influence with came into his hometown and took it over. But yet God gives him influence. And it can look like Daniel has sort of this relatively successful, because Daniel wore great clothes. Read the text, it's in there. Daniel drove a great camel. I'm just assuming that. But he had the best of everything. He had access to it all. And it would be very easy to think, well, he had a pretty good, pretty easy life. I mean, he had some moments where he needed unbelievable faith. Like that lion's den thing, he needed unbelievable faith. But for the most part, it was kind of easy. Well, at the same time Daniel's writing, there's another prophet who's writing by the name of Jeremiah. And if you read Jeremiah's work, you will think he is the saddest man who has ever walked this planet. And then you read his follow-up work called Lamentations, and then you know that he is the saddest man who ever walked this planet. Because we only know 2 verses from Jeremiah. We know that he knows the plans that he has for us. That was his happy moment. Read the stuff around it. He was depressed. It was hard. Day after day after day. And I started wondering, I wonder if Jeremiah ever thought about Daniel and the race marked out for him and thought, man, it must be nice. Eat at the king's table. Wear the best clothes. I've been wearing these same clothes for years. Well, ride in the nicest carriages. Must be nice. Must be nice. I wonder if he ever looked at it from afar because of the struggle that he endured, the pain that he endured, the suffering that he had to go through. That wasn't like this one big moment of pain, but just this constant, and say it must be nice. But then I also wonder if Daniel ever thought about Jeremiah and the stress that he had to deal with in what seemed to be such an easy life, but certainly had these moments of great faith. And I'm going to die if I don't renounce my God. But I can't renounce my God. I wonder if Daniel ever thinks, God, it would have been nice to have the race that Jeremiah has. I know he's probably hurting because his writings are kind of sad. But the thing is this, is that I'd rather deal with that than have to deal with these cataclysmic things. Interpret this thing, and I'm not going to tell you what it is. Otherwise, you all die. I wonder if Daniel ever looked at Jeremiah and thought it must be nice. Because it's all a matter of perspective. We all look at our race as difficult. And we look at their race as the race we would like. I don't think Daniel nor Jeremiah looked at one another and thought it must be nice. Because I think the writer of Hebrews could lean back and look at their example and recognize that they ran with endurance the race marked out for them. They ran with perseverance the race marked out for them. And too many of us fail on our race, not because we make a mistake, not because we mess up, not because we blow it, but because we get our eyes on somebody else's race and therefore we quit our race because our race don't look as good as our perception of their race. You run with endurance the race marked out for you. You bring perseverance to the table for the race marked out for you. And you remember something, that failure isn't about the quality of your race. Failure is about the quitting of your race. It's not about the quality because quality is subjective. Failure comes down to quitting my race. And then the writer in Hebrews 12 makes this last note in verse 3 that I want to draw your attention to today before we pray and close our time together. He says this at the end of verse 3 after talking about Jesus and talking about how he endured the cross and the shame set before him. And he says that you need to set your eyes on him. And here's why. so that you will not grow weary and lose heart. I think the reason a lot of people fail, experience failure, is 100% of the time because they quit. And often what gives you reason to quit is you've grown weary and lost heart. You're tired of it. You thought it'd be different by now. And I'm here to tell you, you won't fail if you won't quit. If you will run with perseverance, the race marked out, you ain't got to be fast. Just one foot in front of another, baby. The tortoise and the hare. Be the tortoise. Just keep moving forward. Just keep moving forward. See, as I was praying for you this week, I really sensed in my heart that there were some of you that would be here today. And the honest truth is you wouldn't call it failing. You're just thinking about quitting. Maybe there's been a dream that you've been fighting towards for months, years, and you know God put it in your heart, but you've been thinking about quitting because it seems like a failure to you. I came to tell you, if you won't quit, you won't fail. Some of you came in here, you've been thinking about quitting your marriage because this is not what it was cracked up to be. You pictured something different. You pictured something completely different than the reality of what it is. And you've been thinking, well, maybe my marriage will fail. Your marriage won't fail unless you quit. So don't quit. Keep fighting. Get some counseling. Talk to some people who have the kind of marriage that you want to have, and you can see it up close and personal and realize that it ain't all like my grandmama used to say, turn up tulips and pop up petunias. There's difficulty along the way, but baby, you can make it. You won't fail if you won't quit. Some people are in here today who've been thinking about quitting in their faith. Just being like, man, this is dumb, man. This ain't turning out the way I thought it was going to. If you won't quit, you won't fail. Keep going. I felt in my heart while I was praying this week that there may be somebody in here thinking about quitting their life because life has not turned out like you thought it would. And you're like, maybe my life should just be over. Maybe God made a mistake with me. Maybe he didn't make a mistake with you. He didn't mess up with you. He knew you in your mother's womb before you were ever formed. And you are not a failure because you're not going to quit. You're going to keep moving forward because God has purpose and destiny connected to the race he marked out for you. So keep going, baby. He's with you. We're with you. And we are going to run with perseverance, the race marked out for us.